Alright, so if you're caught up on this video series, in the last episode, I went to the world's largest flood pump, which was purchased for me via my anime crew helping me out and buying me tickets. So after the fact, I wanted to help out the anime crew, so I went back to Tokyo and bought them all steak dinners. Mune Busters 2, hopefully coming in 2026. Ugh, I need to work on Mune Busters 2 when I have a chance. Anyway, I wanted to do something nice and fun for the anime crew, so we went after dinner to this nice Patlabor experience in Tokyo, which maybe some other YouTubers have already done already, but hey, it's Patlabor, and that's pretty cool. So yet again, I have to ask, is the Patlabor experience a tourist trap?
この番組はヨランのスポンサーのお提供でお送りします。
Oh god, yes. Maximum level tourist trap. Very trap, very hot trap. And overall, the experience kinda sucked. Although I gotta say, if they were a little bit more upfront about what they were doing, I would lessen their trap level. Anyway, it was weird. So we took a cab down to the warehouse district in the middle of Tokyo between like Akihabara and the Skytree to deal with the Patlabor experience. Now, I've seen a lot of other Tokyo influencers on YouTube and Insta being like, oh, hey, I got to pilot this super crazy giant robot. Look at this. It's Optimus Prime. You got to try it. And I was totally curious. And I was like down in the reeds with like a few other Japanese robot aficionados who seemed really positive about this and indicated that the 1-1 Ingram upper torso was constructed with technology that is shared by some of the engineers who made the Yokohama Gundam and the recent Arcax Armored Trooper prototype unit. So, okay. The one thing that massively annoyed about this experience, the number one thing wrong with it was just the lack of transparency about exactly what it was and exactly how it plays out. So I knew that just to walk in the door, you pay $25 to open the door and look at the Ingram. Ooh, the Ingram. And yeah, I knew that was coming. Then I also knew that you have to pay another $10 to sit down in the Ingram and I guess get your photo taken in it, which I did, and that was another whole dramatic thing. But what completely bummed me out after the fact and apparently gave me sticker shock was that to fully control the Ingram and have 100% like motion and freedom and make it do things, there's a final surprise charge of $120. And I'm like, what? For real? I thought if I paid $10, you would let me move the robot. But no, it's $120 after the $10, which is just what you pay to sit down in. Wait, is there like a reality where I don't pay to sit down and I have to control it standing up? Anyway, this wasn't advertised, so it pissed me off. I would believe that if I just paid $10 to sit in the Ingram would move. And if they hadn't hidden that control activation fee and told me up front it was $120, I might have thought twice and I might have paid it. But because they sprung it on me last second, I was like, hell no. Like, this robot won't move unless you give us $120? That totally ruined the experience for me. I also kind of ruined over the course of the trip that I don't mind spending money if it's something important, if I think it's something fun, but I hate surprise fees because if I'm not mentally prepared to spend money, then I won't. Also, when I got into the cockpit later, the actual cockpit controls seemed kind of totally fake, so I wonder if maybe the real robot is controlled with like a PS5 controller somewhere else or something. The mechanic guy seemed to indicate that he had some sort of like power glove motion controller, so it's possible that that's how it's controlled, or maybe that was like a joke or some fictional joystick or some like bullshit from the anime. Okay, one important thing I think I have to mention about the anime Patlabor, in case you've never seen it. The Patlabor that I like is less about robots who are cops and more about people living in Tokyo having to deal with their normal lives, except there's giant robots around them. And this experience weirdly recreated that very specifically through a cast of quirky characters running the robot factory and the experience. Okay, so trying to explain the beats of this experience were weird. You go into this warehouse and there's 3 people inside it. And what's really bizarre about this experience is that even now I'm confused if these people were like actors LARPing as these Patlabor roles or if they were real people working a 9-to-5 job in this Tokyo Patlabor experience factory place, because they did weird shit where they would like break the fourth wall and they were like simultaneously existing in both the real life of like the world of the Patlabor anime, and it was honestly so confusing. Like one of the most confusing experiences I've ever had in my life, because they would just flip back and forth between this is an anime, this is Neo Tokyo, between this is completely real, this is a giant robot, this is Tokyo 2025, it sure is hot today. Like they were acting, but doing such a bad job of the acting that it was unnerving, almost dizzying. Like, if I had to compare it to anything, like, remember the old Colbert Report show and the character Stephen Colbert would portray on that show where he would, like, lie through his teeth, but every once in a while he would, like, ask a real question about something he was concerned about to, like, throw people off? Like, imagine having a conversation with that guy, like, he was constantly lying, but at the same time you knew he was lying and you also couldn't make him stop lying. That's basically the Patlabor experience. Everyone's constantly lying to you and you have no ability to make them stop. Like, the cast of characters here at the Patlabor experience, to start with, there was Cash Register Girl. Cash Register Girl was the least interesting character. She was not social at all, and I'm very disappointed that in other people's YouTube videos, Cash Register Girl was a cosplayer, but ours was just like a fancy businesswoman. The next most interesting dude was the Mechanic, a character lightly based on Patlabor comedy relief character Mechanic Shigeo Shiba, except in this case, this was a real dude who was also a Ukrainian refugee and seemed to speak English as his first language and was so-so at Japanese. He was also too nerdy and too skinny to fight in the Ukraine war, so he was here in Tokyo repairing this giant robot. But once again, the line on this experience was so blurred between reality and fiction that I was genuinely confused if this guy was a real robot mechanic working in Tokyo or just an actor playing one. But he did seem to know his shit about how the robot worked and had the parts for it and stuff, and seemed like an honest-to-God draft dodger from Ukraine, so again, I have no idea where the real guy starts and where the character starts. And finally, the host was just this punk kid from Tokyo. The host was once again the most confusing part of the experience because I had to deal with him the most, and I could tell he was acting, but he was acting badly, and he would also not be normal with me because the experience was real but surreal, and it was just disorienting. I didn't hate this dude, but he was such a bad actor that I wish he wasn't acting at all because he was just trying to give like this veneer of mystery and importance to the situation, but he was overall very bad at it, and he just came off like this confused kid because he was just blurring the line between fact and fiction to the point where both he and I didn't know what was real anymore. Anyway, so the robot turned on, that was cool, and between the sticker shock of, oh fuck, I can't pay $120 to turn this robot on, and the general cringe factor of the confusing LARPing actors, I just did not have a great time here. Anyway, I paid my $10 to enter the robot, and I immediately ended up cutting a huge slash through my leg. So what happened here was that to enter the robot, you had to use these homemade stairs that the guys made, and yeah, somehow I tripped on the stairs, and it cut straight through my leg like a steak knife. Blood everywhere, great start to the experience. Then at the top of the ladder, to enter the Patlabor, you apparently have to crawl into it backwards, which was kind of an unusual move. So yeah, once you get your legs into it, then it's really just like putting on a pair of pants, and I think I'll remember that, because that was maybe the best part of the experience, just putting on my not compensating for anything giant robot pants, which is kind of ironic since this particular Patlabor doesn't happen to have legs. Anyway, that was it, that was all I did, that kind of sucked. They wouldn't even close the cockpit for me just so I could have the full experience of being trapped in the cockpit and seeing what it looked like with the door closed. They did have some mega expensive Patlabor merchandise for sale, and that was great and all, but I was already broke from walking in the door, and they had a few vintage props left over from the now 10-year-old Patlabor live-action movie, and that was kind of all that. The experience, definitely a total tourist trap. Maybe the most tourist trap thing I did on this entire trip. I did not have a great time here. I guess I can still recommend it if you're a hardcore giant robot aficionado and you want to try driving a Patlabor, but be prepared to pay at least $155 if you want the real experience, and that's a lot of money in my book. If they had just been honest about that, maybe I would have given them a better review, but because they sprung it on me, it was very, very, very rage-inducing. But if I'm being honest, the weird characters running the event having crazy synergy with the weird characters from the Patlabor anime maybe was the best part. Maybe that was the silver lining here. But even then, that still doesn't make up for the sticker shock of turning on the robot being $120, or the fact that somehow I lost a lot of my blood in here. Alright, skipping ahead after that, after this was all over, I took the Moonbusters anime crew to Nakano Broadway, where I bought them all ice cream, and we looked at old 1990s Tenchi Muyo merchandise, and I discovered an honest-to-God discarded tokusatsu prop, and that was overall pretty fun. The Nakano Broadway was recommended to me from the game Digimon Cyber Sleuth. That was a good fucking recommendation from that Digimon game. Anyway, next time on this video series, I'm going to the 2025 World's Fair, and that's a very complicated story. Stay tuned!